Hey, what's up? Silas here. This is my daily walk, thinking about something that I thought of after my friend Steven sent me this article I'll tell you about a little bit later on. But the state itself, the state governments, the governments all around the world, the system of states, in my estimation, it is probably one of the most human of constructs that we have, that has ever existed. But what I'm not quite sure is, does it being that human make it one of the most unnatural things to ever have existed, or one of the most natural things to ever have existed? And I think that comes down to how somebody would define both the state, nature, and the state of nature, because if you define nature, you can define what is natural and what is unnatural. And problems in the world happen, not because of what X is, because of how we define X. So just a few thoughts on that. So the article I'm speaking about has something to do with $500 million that Michael Jordan supposedly lost in his net worth. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the state itself. And I define the state as an institution, organization that has a monopoly of coercion over any given area. So there's many other forms of that. Government does not necessarily mean state. Things can be governed without being in a state system. Now, I think I'd like to go on and describe what natural is. And trees, something that is rather fascinating to me. You can check this tree out here. It's a somewhat old tree. It was cut down in different ways and then it regrew again. Then you've got like that tree over there, rather old and has its own ways. Then you also have plants and smaller shrubs and the grass and humans coming in and controlling and organizing the way plants are going to look in certain ways, planting certain things. Just all these different sorts of trees. Which things do you see here are considered natural and which are unnatural? Why is it that someone will consider anything that a tree does, even if you have a tree growing through somewhere and forcing its way around the ground and disrupting other things that are in there and growing, people will say, oh, that's natural, that's a natural way that the tree lives. But if a human being comes and says, okay, I'm going to decide, because human animals like walking sometimes, instead of just walking on the grass, I'm going to create this little sidewalk, and without the state, because here in Kenya, my roads is one of the typical things with the states, but as you can see, there's no sidewalk on that side. In Kenya, normally the road reserve goes all the way to the end of the land, so whoever owns the land owns it all the way until the road. I don't know how loud that's going to be with the cars going up there, but okay, so some people are deciding to build their own sidewalks, and as you can see, this person built his own gutter as well. That's supposed to be taken care of by the state, but they don't come around and clean it. So what is a natural thing for the state to do? In some places, it's natural for the state to build more roads and more sidewalks and clean more gutters, but in some places they don't do that. Some places you'll find just an empty plot, so you might have the gutter coming here, but once it gets up to the empty plot, since no one is there actually taking care of it, no sidewalk, no actual cleaning of the gutter. So even though you clean your gutter and it comes to a certain point, there's going to be a situation where it just blocks up. It has something where it's human beings who disrupt the way things are supposed to work. And people say, oh, that's something that's not there. We need some kind of organization to come in and do something about that and clean up the place and make sure everything is working in an orderly manner. But if it's a tree coming in, if it's just these bushes coming in, who is really doing it? Is nature actually adjusting what's in there? So what is unnatural? Is it natural to just have the shrubs and the bushes and what is that, things like sisal grass or something, just grow that way? Or is it more natural to have living beings that want to exist in a certain way? They just do things in different ways that fit the actual organism in and of itself, outside of what other organisms in general do. Now, in the natural way of things, things exist and coexist. There's going to be certain things that happen. The grass is just growing, but enough people have walked here that it's created a path of itself. Somebody sees a path like this, they normally say, oh, that's a natural path. But again, if they see the sidewalk, they'll say, oh, that's unnatural. And for some people, if they see something like that, where there's actually no sidewalk at all, they would think, hey, it's unnatural for human beings to actually build somewhere and not consider that other people are going to be walking outside. And it's also natural for my aging self to be out of energy and a little out of breath if I'm not paying better attention to my health and exercise and things like that as time goes and I'm climbing up hills. So, natural, things that just exist. the state, monopoly of force, the state being something that is uniquely human. And why do I say uniquely human? Because I've talked about certain things where plants themselves, which are as natural as nature gets, and people think about that, they just exist in a certain location and do what they do: plant, grow, sunlight, soil, water, air, oxygen, carbon dioxide, just the basic thing. Like, you often see these things from just tiny little plants or shrubs growing out. Like, I remember this one video I had, or some time back, I was living in a place where a small tomato plant just came out through the cement through some tiny crack, and I was like, wow, it can grow everywhere. And even when, say, more massive thing like destroying a wall, like something like that, we don't necessarily say that that is forceful. It might destroy other things, but we still don't say it's forceful. We just say that's a natural part of this creature living in a certain way. But there's something about humans, when they act in certain ways, that people start thinking maybe that is necessarily unnatural. So force itself is not simply enacting your will onto something else. That's not the only thing that's considered to be just force. That happens in general. So what is different about the state?
Here's some excerpts from that article that inspired this talk. Jordan 58 initially built his wealth as an NBA superstar and one of the most successful brand endorsers ever. His purchase of a majority stake in the Hornets proved to be a shrewd investment as the value of NBA franchises surged after the last decade. As of March 2015, Jordan was worth $1 billion, which rose to $1.8 billion by March 2019 per Forbes. He continued trending up to his high of $2.1 billion in April 2020 before taking losses the past year. It's possible that such a large decline is related to the biggest Wall Street story of the year, the GameStop stock saga. It's hilarious. 2 years ago, Jordan, the majority owner of the Hornets since 2010, sold a minority stake of the Hornets to two investors. One of them was Gabe Plotkin, founder and chief investment officer for Melvin Capital, a hedge fund that required billions in additional cash after incurring major losses due to a short squeeze of GameStop stock by groups of retail investors. Details of Jordan's current business relationship with Plotkin and other investor aren't publicly known. So they did say it's possible, so they're hedging their bets.
So that's it. That's how much money he lost. And net worth is something different. First of all, net worth is a construct. It's not like literally just getting that money out. Yes, technically, if he decided to, he could take maybe a year to liquidate all his assets and all the things that's into him, and then maybe he can decide to buy a massive money bin full of like $1 coins and try to swim around, even maybe just like $1 bills or something. There's ostensibly he could do something like that, but that's net worth. And money is simply just a means of exchange. I don't begrudge that from Michael Jordan at all. He's done a lot. He with his own work, with his own effort, with his own physical body, he's a human being just like all of y'all listening to this and anybody else who might be beamed out into the future. He's a sentient Homo sapien on the planet Earth. He's a sentient Earthling on called Homo sapien on the planet Earth, on spaceship Earth, some time back, and he was really amazing at basketball. But he earned this money over his whole career, built it up over time, and he's still working, and he's generated so much wealth and value for people. Probably billions of people might have been affected directly and earned some money over his, I think he's hit his 58 or something. Over his 58 years, he's probably done actions that are 2 or 3 people removed from at least 1 billion people either purchasing something or selling something to somebody else. At least 1 billion individual people transactions who have benefited from that. And that's amazing. I would wish somebody in a system like that would be able to get at least $1, at least a percentage of that back in value for every single thing that he's done that way. That one, I don't begrudge that to him at all. I don't really even begrudge the GameStop people. They're just doing their thing. I kind of also sort of don't really begrudge the Melvin Capital people. Although the Melvin Capital people, now that's when we come into the whole state creation, the state mutation, where I'm wondering, is this something that is natural or unnatural because it's something that is very human? The ability to have a system that can maintain a monopoly of force over a given area in this sort of possibly unnatural version of force that's a human construct is something that would enable somebody to have that. Because in an open market, in a free market, Michael Jordan is possibly billions of times better at basketball than I am, but physically as just a human being with his, I think human beings I checked, they have something like around 23 billion cells in our actual body. He's 23 billion cells can jump higher. He could probably still jump higher than I do. He's like much older than I am now. He most definitely still jump higher than I can. But even though he was that much better at basketball than most of the people in the world, especially when during his prime, compared to everybody else out there, he's probably like a multitude of times better than the second best person at that time. Now you get to people like LeBron James who are close to that situation. But it's not like he could jump a billion times higher than I can. It's not even a situation where it's like you can see like these bushes in the back here compared to like a redwood, where you can look at the redwood tree. They're both technically trees. They're both technically plants. But you can see that the redwood is much, much taller. Like the tallest redwoods, I think it's called Hyperion, it's about 115 feet high.
Excuse me with this. I got this mixed up. I was looking this up while walking, and it's 115 meters, not feet. But that mistake with meters and feet will keep going.
A couple of feet. Like you can see that difference where you can be like, okay, that's there. Now with Michael Jordan, he's still just a human being doing different things, but he's doing different things and earning different things. And in a general system, people would still be able to see like, yes, this person is a lot more valuable at this one particular thing than I, Silas, am at that one particular thing. Is it $1 billion more? Is it $2 billion more? He's done a lot more. So as I mentioned, I don't begrudge him that situation. But how do you have a situation where somebody like at the Melvin Capital in the current stock market system, which I'm not even against stock markets, I know a little bit about them, have some friends who've done pretty well at them. I've got to have my friend Steven who sent me this thing back on because he was involved with like the Wall Street bets. Tell me he's been involved with like GameStop and some things like that, and investing that has done pretty well. So there's ways to earn that. These are constructs that we have. The way humans come in and they say, okay, there's resources that we need to actually survive as organisms, and then we find different ways to actually obtain those things. And we can do things where a redwood might require exponentially more resources than that bush to actually exist. But it can still only obtain and control the redwood where the resources where its actual roots are. It needs a lot more sunlight. It needs a lot more water. It needs a lot more soil. It needs a lot. It takes in a lot more carbon dioxide. Produces a lot more oxygen. We realize there's plants, but we realize there's a different valuation. If somebody valued wood, they would understand that redwood would have a lot more wood of value than this bush. If we owned an orchard and we're like growing these bushes versus growing redwoods, we would need a lot more land, we would need a lot more water, we would need a lot more time for the redwoods than we would for the bush. These are things that are rather straightforward to see. But now when it comes to humans, we are still as natural as the bush, as the redwood, but we have other constructs that help us make sense and develop other ways and flourish in other ways. But still, I think in a completely natural, freer environment, Michael Jordan cannot just obtain and control that much money in a general way. He would still, I think, be completely in a situation where he might not need to work as hard or might not need to demand certain things just because of the value that he's had. He'd probably go all over the world and have somebody who'd be willing to give him some food or give him some shelter and things like that, just from his own efforts and from his own value that he's given to people freely in a free exchange. It'd still be a win-win situation for him. I don't really see him getting in a situation where he could just lose $500 million in value, in net value. He's still Michael Jordan. Like, he's still valued by people whether or not his bank account had that or not. But this is a human construct. But I think the only way you can have a system where something like that can happen, like a redwood will never be able to say like, okay, as a redwood, I'm going to control the sunlight that is, redwoods are in California. It's like, I'm going to control sunlight here in Kenya and say, I must have all these lamps here. You're not allowed to use the sunlight. There's some of these lights are actually using like some solar lamps to collect the light. So the redwood will say like, no, I own that solar. In my state system of redwoods, we have a system where you have to pay me if you're using some of the sunlight that I own, because I've signed a contract that I own that, and I'm trading stocks for that. So if you're using the sunlight that the redwood has actually purchased, the Hyperion redwood has purchased, you must give it some value. So the net sunlight value of that redwood, if it's the most massive redwood, most powerful redwood, we agree, one of the most powerful plants in the world, that redwood actually requires that sunlight. So it's part of its net worth. You wouldn't have that. That would be kind of a construct that human beings have created, a situation where you can have a worth, you can have ownership or possession of certain things through fiat currency and through the regulations, the protections, the mutations of the state, to a point where you don't really have control over it, yet it's still part of your actual value. Michael Jordan deserves money that he has. I'm not begrudging that from him. But when you start talking about billions, you start talking about millions for most people even, but millions, billions, trillions, when you start talking about that amount of money, He has earned that. He has worked for that. From his physical self, we can see that he's much more talented than I am. But as I mentioned, he doesn't jump a redwood height versus me jumping a foot. But let's say I could only have my basketball ability was about a foot. Would his basketball ability be 115 feet? Like the redwood, is that the difference? Is it more than that? How much more is that? So if every ability of basketball that's supposed to earn a certain amount was given to all the human beings in the world, what would the average be? One foot. So 1 foot. Then Michael Jordan would be like maybe the Hyperion. Is that the biggest difference? I think it's actually more massive than that. It's a bigger thing like that. I think it's more like the biggest organism in the biggest tree in the world is not Hyperion, but it's this actual tree that has it's on this island that has all these parts and things like the roots underground where it's found. Like it's one of the oldest things. It just keeps the root system grows up and then another part of the tree grows up, and it's been found to be the same tree. Genetically, it's the same tree that just existed there in this one area. And if that tree could actually expand all over the world, I think it would want to. So I think there's practical limitations to this tree. Like the location can't go over water, it's landlocked in a certain area, certain climates won't be able to exist. But if the world could be the climate where this tree exists and it could get its roots all over the world, I don't think that plant would ever want to stop existing, want to stop spreading, if we could get to other planets. So that whole idea of spreading is not necessarily a horrible thing. It's not unnatural to want to acquire more resources, to spread, to exist in that kind of situation. But what is the actual valuation? What is a natural valuation? What is within certain limitations of nature that human beings have somehow exceeded, where you can say that yes, is he 1 billion times, is he 2 billion times more worthwhile than your average person living on $1 a day? Maybe. Some people might say that's unjust for that to happen. But I'd argue that it's like this bush. This bush isn't limited to this out of its own wants. If you said you could be like the redwood, you could be like that tree that just has the roots all over the place, would it say no if it had the opportunity to evolve and to exist in that kind of way? I think it still would. It's a natural thing to want to live, to want to exist, to want to flourish. I think that's a normal thing. But now, with the state, with this situation, when you're trying to actually understand the amount of money that's been created with fiat currency and the mutated markets and the protections and things like this, does Michael Jordan need that amount of money? Not necessarily. Has he really felt a huge negative loss, losing 1/4 of his net worth, essentially, over a couple of months? Has he? Probably not that much. I mean, yes, it's about the money. I can't imagine having the $500 million to begin with to even like lose it to begin with. But it's a whole different kind of mindset. But it's hard for people to really understand this thing. So let's just say that it's the redwood. But if it's the redwood, if let's say he's 1 million times more worth it, like a couple million times. But what is the difference with 2 billion versus 500 million? Or that's 500 million that he lost. How much is the 500 million? Like I just checked to see the distance from the Earth to the moon. And if you had a redwood tree, that Hyperion tree, that 115-foot tree, it would take something. So I double checked. This light math I did, it would take 3,326,086 or so, give or take a couple of thousand redwood trees to get from here to the moon. So that's the size of the redwood compared to just your typical bush. The size, just imagine being as tall as a redwood. Then now imagine needing 3 million of those to actually get to the moon. And still, that's like not even 1% of what Michael Jordan lost in just a few months through the GameStop type of thing, related to the GameStop, related to the Melbourne Capital, related to those people supposedly having amount of control on that kind of money. And then now think of the trillions of dollars that are being discussed by the United States government and other governments in the world. That's just these dollars were these people did not actually physically work on that themselves. They didn't physically actually go out there and blood, sweat, and tears, put in the work, put in the expertise, be that much actually better than anybody else at the thing they choose to do, that anyone can willingly enter and choose to do in order to earn that money. Yet you have politicians like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talk about, they tell you get something's better than nothing, or it costs zero. These people are talking about and controlling levels of money and wealth. It seems so unnatural. Can that even exist? Like, it doesn't even exist. So you have that amount of control, the control of money. So that amount of money has actually gone, just disappeared. Just net worth is gone. Michael Jordan put in all that time to earn that, to own that, to control that. Imagine losing that. Imagine just having the feeling that this is something that I've earned and worked for and continue to work for and continue to employ these people and to do this and just have that money go. And yet you have people in the state controlling trillions, controlling exponentially more amount of money than that and just saying, oh, it's just nothing. And how much time does it take to actually earn these things? For Michael Jordan, yeah, he's earned a lot, so you might say, okay, it doesn't hurt him that much. Just finishing off, Michael Jordan, 58 years, being exponentially better than everybody else at basketball, at the thing that he chose to do. Not as successful when he enters different fields. He tried baseball, was still way better than most people in the world at baseball that have ever tried to play baseball, but still wasn't anywhere close to as good as the top people who decided to do that. Was amazing at basketball, playing the actual game. Then he went in to now be an owner and a GM and things like that, and he hasn't been as successful at that, yet he was very excellently good at actually playing. So he knows this much about that field, and it was still problematic in actually being able to be somebody in a different part of that same field that maintained and enabled him to do that. And he's still giving back. He's still super amazing at that. But he has that amount of money. You have politicians and things like that controlling trillions of dollars, talking about just trillions of dollars here and there disappearing. Going to like the Pentagon, trillions of dollars just disappearing and things like that. Oh, we don't know where these trillions of dollars gone. Oh, we're leaving billions of dollars of material, of like military material in a different country because it's more expensive to bring that stuff back than it is to just leave it there and buy new stuff. It's the amounts of money and the things that are being discussed by these people is crazy. So what do y'all think about this? Do you think it's natural or unnatural? What do you think the state is? Do you think the state, the United States of America, or other states in general, natural or unnatural to be able to earn and have this amount of money, this kind of control, just this system, the organism that it is? It's a body politic. It is a human construct, a social construct. Is it natural or unnatural to have a situation where a black man, he identifies himself as black, in the United States of America, can spend 58 years to earn that $2 billion and have a political system, a structural system where there's systems where people own the money and keep your net worth, things like that, where people can go online and create a system and somebody can wipe out that 500 million. But that $2 billion that it took him to actually earn in that amount of time, that's rightfully his, is also a situation where a black man could earn that in 58 years. So he started back when it's supposed to be even more racist in the past. And then now, just 2 years ago, is it 2 years ago now? One black man dies while he's giving counterfeit money, that counterfeit note that he goes in and he's paying this thing with, that's as real or fake or something as the actual $2 billion net worth that Michael Jordan earned. He goes with his counterfeit banknote, tries to pay it off, then he goes and with drugs and involved in the police brutality and he dies. That person dies, and then millions of people in the country lose $2 billion in net worth by being destroyed by people rioting for like a couple of months. $2 billion gone because one black man dies. Another 58 years, one black man earns $2 billion. That is within the state system of the United States of America. Is that natural? Is that unnatural? Do you think this could happen in a society, in a culture, in a way of living that doesn't include the state? Is this part of nature? Is it unnatural? It's been a bit of a ramble. I think these daily walk type of thoughts, try to work on them a bit more, but just rambling thoughts are here and there. Let me know what you think about that. I don't know. I seriously don't know if I do, at least let me say one thing before I finish off completely. I don't like it when people look at animals, life forms, other earthlings, and say, oh, those are animals, those are life forms, those are plants, and they put human beings in a different category. We are exceptional, but we still are human beings. We still are animals. We still are earthlings. So the things we do are natural. They might be convoluted, they might be complicated, but I don't think they are unnatural. So the state itself, still not quite sure on that one.